This is episode 1165.
The advice I'd give all CFOs is that you have to run a business for itself and for its own sustainability. I think we often lose that in the kind of venture capital fundraise frenzy. And most companies that are successfully exited with venture capital investors do go for sale and acquisition. But you can't build a company that way. You have to actually build a company to be a company, which is sustainable, predictable, actually that generates profit. And when you do those things, lots of options open up for you and lots of possibilities are there. And in fact, you become more attractive to other people. And so actually, that's the biggest takeaway that I always have, is that often it's unclear where your destiny is. But one thing I do know is that you can't let it change the way that you run a business.
If finance is ultimately about capital allocation, what happens when the capital you're allocating determines who gets healthier and who doesn't? In today's conversation, we speak with a CFO operating at the intersection of economics and outcomes. We explore what it really means to measure value when the stakes are human, not just financial. How do you build a business model where savings, sustainability, and mission all have to align? And what does disciplined growth look like in a market flooded with hype and headline-grabbing therapies? This discussion isn't just about healthcare. It's about conviction, trade-offs, and the CFO's role in shaping long-term impact. We begin after this.
They say do what you love and the money will follow. My passion for making life beautiful led to a successful design firm, booming online sales, and a TV show. It also led to chaos, endless spreadsheets, and no single source of truth. We couldn't scale, so we chose NetSuite by Oracle. Now I get immediate visibility across the business, from revenue to customers and fulfillment. Clean, simple, beautiful. NetSuite is critical to the success of my business.
Hello, CFO Manu Diwakar is with us. Manu's career spans private equity at Bain Capital, product P&L leadership at Activision, and hypergrowth finance at Riot Games, where he helped scale revenue past $1 billion. He later led finance transformation and fundraises in digital health before stepping into the CFO role at Virta Health. Manu, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
So, Manu, as always, we begin by leaving it to the finance leader to try to identify what were the experiences he believes best prepared himself for the role or herself for the role of finance leader. What comes to mind for you?
Yeah. Look, I think there are three experiences in particular that stand out for me. I'd say the first one was right before business school when I was an associate working on the North American private equity team at Bain Capital. It was my first kind of full-time job in finance. I had been a management consultant before that. And there is really no better place to kind of understand the full scope of finance, thinking through income statement, cash flow, balance sheet, capital structure, capital markets, governance, thinking about running a business than being at a private equity firm, especially when it's your first time around. And so I credit Bain Capital with helping me learn and teaching me a lot of the fundamentals around finance. I'd say the second experience that really stands out is my time at Riot Games. Riot Games stands out because, when I joined, we were probably only about 200, 300 people, maybe doing $50 million of revenue. And over 5 years, we scaled that business to be over 2,000 people doing $1 billion of revenue when I was there. And you really, really learn and understand how to build a finance function of the company when it's going through that kind of growth. It's like a lifetime's worth of experience over just a few years. And so you develop pattern recognition, you develop habits, and you develop an understanding of what needs to be built and what it takes to be a great finance leader in an organization like that. And the third experience that stands out is the one right after that, which is I went from a business that I helped scale to becoming the head of finance, HR, and legal at a much smaller Series B, Series C company at Victorious. the spoiler alert here is that Victorious did not work out as well as Riot. We sold it to Headspace after I was there for a few years. But I'll never forget it because I had a wonderful board, a wonderful CEO, and who's still a friend to this day. His name is Sam. And then it was also my first time in the captain's chair. And you never forget the first time in the captain's chair because as much as you can prepare for it, when you're actually sitting in the seat, things are really different and the weight of responsibility sinks in very quickly. So those three experiences, Bain Capital, Riot Games, and then Victorious.
You could have gone a number of ways. You could have become a chief strategy officer. You could have been, why finance? And was it always clear to you?
Yeah, my first real brush with finance and accounting and economics was when I was in college. I had planned on becoming a doctor. Most of my family are doctors. My brother's a doctor. My dad was an engineer. I grew up in Detroit. And, in my world, there were kind of two career paths. There was engineer and doctor. And so really when I got to college, I needed to find a major before I went to medical school. And the major I happened to find myself was finance and accounting. And I fell in love with it. As much as I liked science and as much as I wanted to be a doctor, I just liked the subject matter a lot more. And when I imagined what I was going to be doing in the future and what I'd have more fun doing, I went this direction. And so it was around then that I made the decision that I wanted to work in finance for my career. Now, as most people do, you get distracted, life takes you different ways and you meander. But I think often back to kind of how I was thinking about things when I was in college. And I think in college, I may have told my career counselor that I wanted to be a CFO one day. And so here we go.
Mentioned, I'd love to just have you get a little more specific with us. When you're at Riot Games, it was under $50 million. It grew to over $1 billion. And you mentioned how that hyper growth taught you about building finance infrastructure, sort of ahead of scale. Get more specific for us. What did you learn?
Yeah, look, I would say that one of the things being at Riot taught me is that priority number one, priority number two, and priority number three is making sure that you have the right talent in place. And I would say that there are two different vectors from a talent perspective that you have to think about. I think the first thing is that when you're in growth like that, jobs tend to change every 6 months or tend to change every year. And what you really want to do is you want to find incredibly high potential people who are on the upward trajectory of their career and who are willing to work hard and get those experiences and grow their careers. And it ends up in an incredibly positive loop where you have a core team of folks who are always ready to be stretched, always ready to try the new thing. You don't need a lot of them. You actually need fewer of them than if you don't have a team this way. But I learned really quickly to hire much more for motor than for actual technical ability, which can come later and can often be trained. The second thing that I learned, which is going to be interesting because it sort of extrapolates the axis outwards, that depending on where you are in the company and depending on the function you're talking about, the hire really smart people approach hits a natural limitation. Because at some point you end up in a place where you need somebody with 20, 30 years of experience in a deep field in order to really level up what you're doing. So you're not making the same mistakes over again that somebody else is. And so getting the balance of these teammates right and also getting the sequencing of hiring right is actually really, really critical. That is 80% of the ball game, by the way. I think the other 20% of the ball game, which is advice I always give people, is when you're in rapidly changing businesses, finance needs to be accelerating the positive changes that are happening, and they need to be arresting the negative changes that are happening, and they're happening fast. So many CFOs often think only about arresting negative changes. They don't actually think about how to enhance and put fuel on the positive changes that are happening. And so spending time thinking about both and how your efforts are parsed is actually pretty important.
Would any chapter you do differently? There's a product management realm you were part of for a number of years. I mean, tell us something about that and how that might have changed your thinking in
Yeah,
some respect. Yeah.
it's a good question. So right after business school, I took my walk in the desert. I went to go work at an internet company called QuinStreet, which is still around, as a product manager. And then I went to go work in video games. My first job in video games was at Activision Blizzard. As I think it was called product manager, but it was really more of a marketing strategy manager. On the Call of Duty video game. And so I would say, I don't regret either one of those things, mostly because part of finding what you want to do and what your purpose is you got to go try different things and you got to test your hypothesis. My joke is often one of the times I knew that I didn't belong in marketing at Activision. And by the way, I love playing video games. It's my favorite hobby. But we were in a room talking about the color of green we were going to use on a box in one of the game, and I just couldn't focus. Like, I wanted to walk out of the room immediately, and I was like, maybe this isn't for me. But speaking of Quinn Street, I think one thing I regret that I will actually take with me for the rest of my career is Quinn Street at the time was a company who largely used owned media and websites as well as keywords to advertise in order to encourage folks to enroll and enlist and give us their information, which we then turned around and packaged it and sold mostly to for-profit colleges at the time, right? All super legal. Like, we didn't hide anything that we were doing, but I didn't really understand what that business was, I think, before I got involved with it. And I stuck around for a year, but what I told myself after that was that I really wanted to work at businesses where I personally would be proud of what we had built. Again, different businesses, I think, are for different folks. And I think one of the things I realized is that wasn't for me. And so if you look subsequently after that at different points in my career, whether it's video games, whether it's ag tech, or whether it's healthcare technology, and here at Virta, I'm trying to be a part of companies and build something that brings joy and delight and meaning to other people.
You mentioned that several of the companies you were part of were ultimately acquired. What did those transactions teach you about timing, capital strategy,
Yeah.
board communication? Any of the above?
Look, I'd say the biggest thing about thinking about an exit, whether it's a sale or whether it's an IPO, a successful exit, is the advice I'd give all CFOs is that you have to run a business for itself and for its own sustainability. I think we often lose that in the kind of venture capital fundraise frenzy. And most companies that are successfully exited with venture capital investors do go for sale and acquisition. But you can't build a company that way. You have to actually build a company to be a company, which is sustainable, predictable, actually that generates profit. And when you do those things, lots of options open up for you and lots of possibilities are there. And in fact, you become more attractive to other people. And so actually, that's the biggest takeaway that I always have, is that often it's unclear where your destiny is. But one thing I do know is that you can't let it change the way that you run a business.
I think it was your third item. You emphasized the cross-functional finance, HR, operations experience that you received, and I'm just wondering if how that impacts your philosophy as a CFO today, and whether there are certain aspects of HR which I don't need to be part of, but then there are some other conversations that you have with HR today that perhaps are well informed by that past experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I came to Victorious and I took the broader role, one thing that you find is that smaller companies, there aren't really enough people around to kind of take ownership and do work. And so it was really kind of an accident, which is, again, I credit Sam for this, is that he saw that I was doing a good job with the finance team. He's like, hey, wait a second, don't you, like, can I give you these other things? And I'm generally one to focus on learning. I'm not one to focus on scope. I'm not one to focus on title. But when Sam said that he needed me to do this for the benefit of Victorious, I was like, sure, I'm game for that, man. I'm here to support and I'm here to help. And so I learned how to do it. And I think when you're at a small company, running an HR team is really about three things. It's about getting the compliance right. It's about getting compensation right, and it's about getting hiring right. And there's actually a really good tie-in to finance. If you think about most technology businesses and venture-backed businesses, the number one use of capital is on payroll. That's all these companies really spend money on, you know? And the funny thing is the primary job description of a CFO, I think, is being responsible for capital allocation inside of a company. Well, if all of your capital allocations to people, then all you're really talking about is whether or not you have the right people and whether they're organized effectively against the right things. There's a ton of overlap between people and finance. And I think it's because one is money and one is people. I think often they seem like two very different things, but at the highest strategic level, like they're actually deeply intertwined. And I was fortunate that I got that opportunity at Victoria's. And actually, a couple of months ago, Sami asked me to do the same thing at Virta. And so at Virta, in addition to managing the finance team, I manage our people team and our legal team. We have an amazing chief legal officer, an amazing chief people officer who are fantastic partners and way better at their jobs than I am. But one of the reasons the structure exists is because there's so much interconnectivity between these functions, and you need to manage them together, not separately.
Well, thank you for that. We may have a few more career-related questions a little later for you, but right now let's find out about Virta Health. Tell us about this company. What's it about? What are its offerings?
Yeah, let me start with kind of what we do and who we serve. So Virta reverses metabolic disease, and metabolic disease is a relatively new term. McKinsey recently published a study that suggests that close to 90% of Americans suffer from metabolic disease. Metabolic disease is a broad set of conditions that have the same root cause. So we'll talk about the conditions first. Type 2 diabetes, obesity, liver disease, kidney disease, heart disease, high blood pressure. They are all metabolic disease in that they are symptoms of the same root cause, branches of a tree, if you will. That root cause is poor nutrition. That's it. It's the whole ballgame. Generally speaking, you get your calories from three sources: fats, protein, and carbohydrates. Most people don't have this balance correctly. And it's a gigantic failing of our healthcare system. And this is what Virta is here to solve. We are here to work with members and patients and deliver them care by a combination of medical professionals and technology in order to help them reverse their metabolic disease. In order to do so, we partner with the folks who are paying for their healthcare. Those are insurance companies, those are employers, and in some cases, it's the government. And the reason you partner with those folks is that if you can get people metabolically healthy and they don't have these branches of the tree, they actually cost a lot less money. You don't have to spend as much on healthcare on these people. And people who spend money on healthcare have deep incentives to figure out a way to get healthier populations so they can save themselves some money on healthcare costs. And so it's a B2B2C model, and that's what we do, and that's what we deliver.
From a CFO's perspective, then, how do you sort of quantify clinical outcomes?
From the CFO's perspective, it's pretty simple. When you work with a client, you have folks who are enrolled on Virta, employees typically, and employees who are not enrolled on Virta. You can use a healthcare claims data set from both a pharmacy claims and a medical claims perspective to understand what the total cost of taking care of these folks is between Virta members and non-Virta members with the same disease and conditions. It creates a really clean A/B test for us to be able to understand what that looks like. For type 2 diabetes, what we're able to deliver is a 2-to-1 ROI on the members that we treat for our clients. And so this data is actually incredibly powerful in making the argument that your patients cost a lot less.
From what I was looking at the website, and it was somewhere on the web, but I was reading that Virta somehow positions itself as a sort of a sustainable alternative in GLP-1 off-ramp. And the thought was, how does finance evaluate the long-term cost savings narrative in a market that's so captivated by these new drugs and therapies?
Yeah. I think it's actually relatively straightforward. If a member is on Virta, their weight loss is almost identical to what GLP-1s are. And for folks who we are treating for weight loss, we charge about $150 a month. The list price of GLP-1s for most employers is $1,000 per patient per month. If you get rebates, it's roughly $500. And I think if you even go and you try to cash pay with Lilly or with Novo, it's a few $100. And so for a client of ours, which is typically an employer, you would much rather have somebody see identical weight loss in a much lower cost way. The second thing that's really important is most people don't take drugs forever, nor do they want to take drugs forever. And so we do know that if you stop taking GLP-1s, weight comes back. There's a research paper published on our website where we've actually looked at what happens at Virta patients who stay on Virta after they've been deprescribed GLP-1s and those who are continuing on Virta. And actually, if you stay on Virta and you stop taking your GLP-1s, like we can keep your weight off, right? And again, it's pretty simple because we're attacking the root cause problem. We're encouraging you to change your nutrition habits. And as a result, those changes are sustainable and long lasting.
So as this company scales nationally, give us some idea of where you're making the investments. I mean, is it in talent? Is it in technology? Is it in your partnerships that you mentioned?
Yeah.
Where is the investment being made?
Yeah, look, when we have surplus capital left over, there's really two places to invest it in. We invested in sales and marketing, and then we invested in product and engineering. Sales and marketing, there are two places to invest in. One is what I would describe as our B2B sales and marketing team, which is our team that markets to and sells employers and health plans in the government. And then there's our B2C sales and marketing team, which is really about partnering with existing clients to build awareness at those clients. So those members and those employees then enroll in Virta. This is pretty straightforward. Our unit economics are solid. We can keep investing and we can keep paying for growth. It's not a problem at all. And on top of that, our market share is still tiny. You know, we just went through it. 90% of US adults have metabolic disease, right? And so Virta, even today, we've treated about 200,000 patients over the course of our history, is still a drop in the bucket compared to kind of the huge market potential. The second place we invest money is in technology. And technology is actually really important. What we try to do with technology is we try to invest it in a way that really improves patient care and patient outcomes. And by improving patient care and patient outcomes, we make patients healthier. We also save our clients a lot of money, which then feeds into kind of very natural sales and marketing efforts and our ability to retain our clients as well. And so those are really the two sources of investment that we have at the company.
In listening to different, inside this realm of digital health, frequently the earnings calls, at least that I've listened to in the past, there's often a dual narrative, one where they talk about the impact the offerings are having, and then the margin discipline. Can you reflect a little bit on that for us? Is there a dual narrative here, or do you look at it differently?
I think I look at it a little bit differently. Our business model is tied at the hip. If patients are healthy, clients save money, and if clients save money, they have no problem sharing that with Virta, right? It's actually a narrative that works quite well. And if you can figure out how to deliver that narrative at the lowest cost possible, there's a ton of benefit in running a healthy business. Like, said another way, if I increase prices on a client to pad my bottom line, I just eroded a client's savings, right? And that's not a positive indicator for the long-term health of that relationship, right? Instead, what I want to do is continually figure out through better patient care how to deliver more value for our clients and more savings. And if they do that, they'll reward me, and you can run a healthy business that way. I think this sort of tension we don't experience the tension between getting patients healthy and trying to worry about cutting corners to pad our bottom line. Like, our business is thankfully not working that way.
Can you tell us something about your finance organization or how you structure your team? Is it something that you've changed along the way, or you realized inside this realm that's not as necessary as perhaps this person being, partnering in a different fashion? I don't know. Can
Yeah.
you tell us something about your mindset?
There are three pillars that we have on the finance team. One is financial strategy. One is accounting, and inside of accounting is tax and treasury and all that good stuff. And then the third pillar is revenue cycle management, which is a healthcare special, because billing is more complicated in healthcare than in any other industry I've worked in. Um, and so those are kind of the three verticals. And I think I've been fortunate enough to have a strong finance leader and a strong accounting leader. And we just brought on an incredibly new, strong RCM leader who can then build and scale those functions appropriately. Over time, as the business has grown and gotten more complex, we've built up our strategic finance team to find folks who can really partner with those operators and drive those results that they need to. Accounting has grown over time. Like, we've both added bandwidth as well as added specialty kind of functions inside of accounting. We have people who would be fully capable to do SEC and SOX work. We recently hired a director of tax and so on and so forth. And then revenue cycle, I think we keep trying to innovate with technology, and we kind of keep growing that team. So the structure is held, the leadership has been good, and we've been slowly augmenting with talent over the last couple of years.
So we want to talk to you a little bit about AI. Clearly, Virta's model is deeply data-driven. Fill us in a little bit. How is AI helping you shape this business model?
Yeah. So where AI shows up for Virta is it extends the power of the clinicians that we have on staff. It both makes them more efficient and it makes them more effective. That's the power of AI. And this only works because we have an incredibly rich data set on everybody who's been a patient of Virta and what their health journey has looked like and how they've responded to various interventions, both human as well as technology, and how that then lines up with all of their biomarkers that they've provided us over the course of time. And so if you think about it, any patient that shows up, what we're trying to do is we're always trying to run real-time segmentation for us to understand which one of those 200,000 prior patients and points in the curve does this person match to at any given time, and then what care we have to give them on a personalized basis in order for them to move down their curve the right way, or to jump curves or change curves if we feel like they're off track. So figuring out how to provide the right care in the right way at the right time is incredibly expensive unless you use technology. And what this recent, and I think all that has happened in the last couple of years, to be really reductive, is the AI models have just gotten a lot more powerful. And so if you marry a much more powerful model on top of our existing data set, it really can hypercharge the way that we deliver care.
Data was central to growth at Riot as well. I mean, what are there parallels that you see, or is this altogether in a whole new realm as far as healthcare analytics is concerned?
We spent a lot of time at Riot making sense of our player data and marrying it to what our experience and the qualitative feedback we were getting back from players was, in order to figure out what to build and what to prioritize and what to do. We used to say something at Riot that I think is still true at Virta, which is we want to be data informed and less about being data driven, right? And so there's always a data backdrop to kind of how we make decisions in terms of what product to build and kind of what to focus on and what problems to solve. I think we think about it the same way at Virta. We spend a lot of time parsing our patient data in order to understand which points in our care journey and care delivery we can improve to help people achieve better metabolic disease reversal.
Has AI become a part of your forecasting approach?
Yeah, it actually has, and so we use AI to make sense of kind of very large data sets. Whenever we put a forecast and actuals are showing up, we're actually always back testing our models and seeing if they're working accurately. And so again, I think, again, it may be simple, but like I think this has really unlocked for us from a forecasting perspective, allowing our finance team to do more statistical analysis and data-based forecasting, like in a way that previously only would have been unlocked if I had employed some stats PhD or some machine learning people.
What about when it comes to revenue cycle management? That pillar you mentioned in the individual you brought on board, is AI going to be a big part of that realm?
Yeah, it's a lot simpler for ours. So the way most providers are using AI in revenue cycle management, so this is all the rage at doctor practice and health systems right now, is that what they're doing is that they're taking patient visits and patient procedures, and rather than a human reviewing a bunch of notes and figuring out what codes to put on it so they can bill the insurance company, the AI is doing all of that work. And as you can imagine, it's doing a thorough and more better job on coding than a lot of people can, right? And so that's how they're using it. And so they're using it. And I think if you hear about it, if you hear insurance companies talking about this, they're seeing bigger and bigger and bigger than ever bills from all of their providers for this reason. Simultaneously, the insurance companies are then using AI in order to fight back against these claims. And so it's a little bit of an AI arms race on both sides. Ours is much more simple, Jack. We have one price per engaged patient that we bill our clients per month. There are no shenanigans with the way that we bill. And so for us, revenue cycle management and using any technology or AI is largely about how to take work out of the hands of humans and then let robots do it. And what that ends up doing is for our humans on staff, it actually creates a more fulfilling experience because they can solve problems. They can be in front of customers. They can be in front of other team members. They can be working on new things. And what you avoid doing is having somebody with a spreadsheet open and a web page open and sitting there manually punching and entering data.
At the same time, just related to patient data, it's so sensitive and it's regulated. How do you balance this AI innovation with governance and compliance?
No, this is an excellent question. So, as a healthcare company, we are governed by the kind of set of laws associated with HIPAA. And so there are very clear limits and boundaries and precautions that we have to take with all of our client data and all of our patient data. So I think that's the first world that we live in. The big danger of the AI is that if you're not careful, somebody can open up Gemini or ChatGPT, paste confidential patient data in, and all of a sudden that data is released to the wild. And so we spend a lot of time and effort both educating and creating controls around this, so all patient data lives in our ecosystem and our infrastructure. And so that's kind of what we do there. But we do use that data to try to deliver our clients and our patients better service. And I think that's our responsibility to them.
Taking a step back, or maybe jumping up to 10,000 feet here, just looking over the realm altogether, not just specific to Virta. How do you see AI changing sort of the economics of chronic disease management? What's happening? What's going to happen here?
So metabolic disease reversal has always been achievable, right? But it's been achievable because you would check yourself into a clinic and receive very expensive healthcare, personalized healthcare, and everything from your exercise routine to your food to your doctor's appointments would be mapped out. Your vitals would be taken every so often. And so if you uncap spend, it was always possible, right? And what Virta has tried to do over time is it's tried to leverage technology for the thing technology is really good for, which is lowering costs, to figure out how to extend that care to more and more and more folks. Time approaches infinity. If you're in a place where much of healthcare can be delivered by technology, I have to imagine that it knocks the unit cost of healthcare way down over time. I was even talking to our chief medical officer one day is, pick any number of sci-fi movies. Can you walk into an operating room that is attended by one person where they strap you into a table or an apparatus of some kind and you press a button and you're off to the races on some surgical procedure, right? And the thing that about that to remember is that that's actually pretty inexpensive to deliver if you get there. And if you think about the number one problem of our healthcare system in this country, it costs too much to treat people. And so via technology, can you dramatically lower the cost of healthcare? And it actually solves, I think, one of society's biggest problems if you can manage to do it.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We are up to what we like to refer to as our finance strategic moment. And again, this is where we just ask our guests to share a moment of insight that they've had along the way. You've probably had a half dozen of these today, Manu, but tell us what comes to mind when we ask for a finance strategic moment.
Yeah, so the favorite story I have to share here, which I think as goes along with kind of a prior story I told on building a sustainable business, is when I worked at Ceres, we had two separate business lines. One business line where we were focusing on providing software for farmers who were growing specialty crops. So think grapes, berries, tree nuts, expensive crop. Then we had another business where we were trying to deliver the same thing to folks who are growing corn and wheat on dry land, like not irrigated, right? Or very lightly irrigated. And the cost of delivery was prohibitively expensive. But if you're talking about acres of wine grapes, those farmers can afford it, right? And also the value to them to make better decisions is quite high. But if you take that same concept and you put it on acres of corn that is irrigated by rainfall, like all of a sudden the product doesn't become interesting. The crops are much lower value. And if you're delivering extremely expensive technology, like other than a toy to play with for the farmer, there's no economic benefit, right? And we had launched this business and we were trying to scale this dry land business. And I sort of put two and two together after I was at the company for a few months. And I went to our CEO and I was like, his name's Ash. And I was like, Ash, I'm not really sure I understand this. It feels like we need to build a product where the technology one day has to be low enough cost for this to make sense, or the product has to solve a different use case for these farmers. And so I understand we're trying to make it work, but capital is scarce. And like, I think maybe we should walk away from this business so we can focus on the other thing that's not as good. And so that's always kind of the story that I tell, because especially in the venture-backed world, you get so caught up in raising money, trying to grow revenue, trying to build new technology, that often what gets lost in the shuffle is whether you actually have a thing that you should be growing or not, or whether it's a thing that you still got to go to work on and tinker with.
We want you to think back to the first time you stepped into the CFO role. And there are books about this, the first 90 days, the first 100 days in a new job. But as a new CFO, what is it that you wish, if you could go back in time and tell yourself this, what is it that was missing? You know, you were so ready for the job, ready for the role. But at the same time, there must have been something that surprised you. Anything?
Yeah, I would say the thing that took the most getting used to is that the buck stops with you. It really does stop with you. And I think where rubber often hits the road on that is when you know in your heart of hearts that there is a decision that needs to be made or a course that needs to be corrected. There's no putting a presentation together and giving it to somebody else to do something about. Like, it's you. You both have to put the presentation together, often at small companies, and then you have to go do something about it. And the going and doing something about it part is not easy. And it's not easy because it's hard work. It's not easy because convincing other people, taking bullets, and being unpopular are difficult things. But you won't find peace until you figure out how to stand up for what you think is right and advocate for those positions. Doesn't mean you have to be right 100% of the time, but it does mean that you need to speak up and you need to take action when you have conviction about something.
I want to ask you something about your start. And again, you have a sort of a glamorous resume, I'll say, with Bain, and you have Harvard Business School and University of Michigan. I don't always dwell on that, but you could have gone into banking, investment banking. You didn't. So you made a deliberate choice. You went into consulting, but you didn't stay all that long in consulting either. 3 years, you could argue, is a long time, or private equity. You jumped into industry fairly quick. How am I doing? Yeah. Can you reflect a little on that for us?
Yeah, I Much of it comes down to figuring out what makes you happy, what drives you. What I realized in my late 20s is that if I'm not happy and engaged at work, I'm not doing my best work and I'm not being my best self. I think there's a lot of people out there who can grin and bear it and still do great work. I'm just not one of those people, Jack. And so I figured that out about myself pretty quickly. And I know that there are a couple of things that are true there, right? Which is I am a finance professional, I am a CFO, but at the end of the day, satisfaction for me is a lot more than about did I get a huge bonus and did I go buy things with it, right? Those things are nice. I'm a human being like everybody else, but there are people who that's enough for them, right? And it's just as a person, it's not enough for me. And so that was one discovery I had about myself. The second discovery I had about myself is that I really needed to be in the arena. I needed to take ownership. I needed to see for myself what I was made of and whether I could be a part of teams that were trying to get stuff done and trying to build companies. And so these things kind of led me down the path of where I am today. I will tell you that if I was a partner at a private equity firm or if I was a portfolio manager at a hedge fund, I don't think I would be as good at that job as I am as good at this one, right? And so I think I found the place where I can be my best self, and that's how I think about it. Look, I also graduated from business school in 2009 in the depths of a financial crisis, right? And so the world also sort of worked itself out for me in such a way that I had to go explore this path. And so hard to tell whether it's luck or happenstance or circumstance or whether anything was meant to be or whether this is just the journey you went on, but this is the journey that I've been on.
Yeah. Well, thank you for allowing me to ask you about that. I just want to just emphasize why I brought it up again. You have these product management roles sort of after your graduation from Harvard Business School. I've just seen too many investment bankers, like someone who spent 5 years at Morgan Stanley or wherever, with a resume similar to yours. So you took a different path. I'm just pointing that out, and I find it interesting. We always like to ask our guests to reflect a little on the personal side for us. Wondering, is something from your past, something your colleagues might not know about you, interest that you have, some feat, doesn't have to be athletic, but something come to mind?
I think maybe a thing some of my colleagues have figured it out more recently because it's sitting here behind me if I don't have a screen up. But I actually played the piano when I was a kid from about the age of 7 or 8 all the way until I graduated from high school. And when I have downtime or I have 5 or 10 minutes before meetings, I need to clear my head. I just try to go play my piano for a little while.
Are you playing classical? Or are you playing?
I play classical. Yeah.
Yeah. Interesting. Well, thank you for that. What about a book or a resource for us? Is there something that you've come back to over time? Some book from business school, or maybe it's something you escape with, or you just have interest in. Anything you can share?
Yeah, there are two books that I have read a few times that I would describe as, more serious books, but they're not academic books. One is Barbarians at the Gate, which is a really old favorite. I don't know if kind of newer professionals or younger professionals in finance know about it or read it, but it's this sort of like amazing tale of like what finance and private equity looked like in the 80s. And the interesting thing is, as much as it's about the drama and the personalities, there are also a lot of interesting core financial lessons and concepts in that book. And it's something that I find myself like, every 5 or 6 years kind of maybe coming back to and just kind of chuckling about it as I read it. And at every stage of my career in life, I actually think I've gotten something different out of reading that book than I did when I read it the first time. I'd say the second book that I've read a few times from a fiction perspective is actually The Count of Monte Cristo. And part of the reason that that book has drawn me and appeals to me is that it is an interesting study on the sheer amount of determination and an intelligence that a person has to employ in order to make things happen the way they want to over a really long time frame. And I think the most fascinating thing about it is it's both a lesson in determination and really pushing to get what you need, but also a lesson about like the why behind those things matter a lot, which is at the end of the book, it's all come true, but like, he's left as an empty shell of a person because he was all doing it for revenge. There was nothing else there, right? And I think that, again, what it shows you is, to make the world happen the way you want to is not easy. It takes a lot of determination and a lot of hard work. But at the same time, check your reasons and make sure you're doing things for the right reason. Otherwise, no matter how hard you work, you're not going to be happy at the end of it.
Wow. Well, thank you for that. We are up to our final question, Manu, where we're going to ask you for your priorities for the coming 12 months as CFO of Virta Health. What would those be?
Yeah. We have scaled the business now to a point where we're a scaled company. We're doing about $200 million of run rate revenue. We are break even, I think, for the first time in our company's history. And so we're looking towards the future and trying to figure out what to do next. And I think, again, connecting back to the first theme we started on, I am continuing to work with the team on trying to figure out how to make this a sustainable business that is healthy and can continue investing in itself so we can keep growing over time. There's a long time between us and reversing metabolic disease in 1 billion people, which is our mission statement. And the thing that I can do to help the company is make sure the company is the healthiest version of itself so it can gird up for that very long journey.
Manu Diwakar, thank you for joining us on CFO Thought Leader.
Thanks for having me, Jack. I appreciate it.